From accidental haunting to tragic death, some of the most talented actors have enjoyed their success that followed, but some have suffered for their art. In this 5-part miniseries, we'll be looking into some of the most infamous curses that have left an everlasting shadow over Hollywood. Warning. This episode contains images that some may find disturbing. In 1989, James O'Barr published the first of the Crow comic books. It told the story of a musician rising from the grave to avenge his and his fiancee's murder. O'Barr began working on the comic as both a writer and illustrator in 1981 as a way of coping with the death of his own fiancée Beverly after she was killed by a drunk driver. In 1992, Alex Proyas became the director of a movie adaptation, with the lead role going to Brandon Lee, son of martial arts legend Bruce Lee. Lee was beginning to transition to American action films such as 1991's Showdown in Little Tokyo with Dolph Lundgren and as Jake Lowe in 1992's Rapid Fire alongside Powers Booth. The Crow would be his breakout role, with a stellar cast including Ernie Hudson, Michael Wincott, Tony Todd and John Polito. Brandon Lee hoped to make a name for himself as more than just the son of Bruce Lee. In the comic book, Eric and his fiancée Shelley are attacked by a street gang when their car breaks down. Eric temporarily survives a gunshot to the head but is paralyzed, looking on as Shelley is beaten, raped, and also shot in the head. The attack differs slightly in the film as the gang invade the couple's loft apartment. Eric's death changes to being stabbed and shot in the torso before being thrown out of the window. He's resurrected a year later by a mysterious crow who acts as a guide for Eric to take his revenge on his killers. Eric works his way through the gang before coming to Top Dollar, who reveals he ordered the attack, leading to a climactic battle on the church roof. Brandon Lee gave an unforgettable performance as Eric Draven, one that surely would have led to a long and successful career. But tragedy struck on set. In the initial attack scene, Lee's character is shot in the doorway as he walks into the room by Funboy, played by Michael Massey. A close-up shot of Funboy firing his .44 Magnum had just been filmed, which required a dummy cartridge to be loaded into the gun for realism. Rather than purchasing dummy cartridges, the crew pulled bullets from actual live rounds, dumped the powder charge and reinserted the bullets. However, a live primer was accidentally left in one of the cartridges, giving the partly deactivated round enough force to be driven partly into the gun barrel. The lodged bullet went unnoticed. For the wide angle of Funboy shooting Eric Draven, the dummy cartridges were exchanged for blank rounds, the opposite of dummy cartridges, featuring powder and primer but no actual bullet. This gives the illusion of a gun being fired without any projectile travelling through the barrel. However, as the previously fired bullet was still lodged in the Magnum, the blank cartridge's charge forced it out with the same force as a live round, and it hit Lee in the abdomen from a distance of 12 to 15 feet. Lee was rushed to New Hanover Regional Medical Center, but after 6 hours of surgery was pronounced dead on March 31st, 1993. He was 28 years old. He was buried next to his father, a plot his mother Linda Lee Caldwell had reserved for herself. With only 8 days left of filming, Brandon had already shot most of his scenes and was only scheduled for 3 more days. Producers decided to finish the film after approval from Brandon's fiancée ELIZA Hutton, using a body double and CGI and dedicating the film to Brandon and ELIZA when it was released a year later in May 1994. The accident had a profound effect on the cast, and most did not want to return to the set 2 months after Lee's death, but all felt they should finish it because the film meant a lot to Brandon Lee. Michael Massey, who fired the gun, took a year off acting and never saw the finished film. He went on to have a long list of TV and film roles including The Amazing Spider-Man and its sequel, CSI, Law & Order, Criminal Minds, The X-Files and the first season of 24. He died in 2016 from stomach cancer at the age of 64. Rochelle Davis played the role of Sarah at 12 years old. Her character was a friend of Eric and Shelley. Rochelle unfortunately had to film one more scene in the apartment with Lee's body double as her character visits Eric near the end. The accident affected her so badly that she stopped acting for 15 years, returning for a small role in 2009's Hell House. Ernie Hudson had flown to California just days before the accident after the death of his brother-in-law. He was convinced to return to the film by Lance Anderson, Brandon Lee's makeup artist. He's gone on to have a long career and will reprise his role as Winston in the upcoming Ghostbusters Afterlife. Michael Wincott was already known for playing Guy of Gisborne in 1991's Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Following The Crow, he continued to play villainous characters in films such as Alien Resurrection, The Count of Monte Cristo, serial killer Ed Gein in the Hitchcock biopic, and he too appeared as a main villain in 24. Sophie Shinas, who played Shelley, was immediately flown back to LA by her agent following the accident, as she described herself as an emotional wreck. The Crow was her first acting role, and she appeared only in small films afterwards. Director Alex Proyas took the most convincing to complete the film, as he was also very close to Brandon Lee. He agreed only after producers allowed him an indefinite period of bereavement. The Crow was also his first feature film, having previously been known as a music video director. He went on to direct only a handful of other films, including iRobot and Gods of Egypt. Brandon Lee's death reminded many people of his father's own untimely death on set. Bruce Lee was recording dialogue replacement for his iconic 1973 film Enter the Dragon, when he collapsed with seizures and headaches. He was diagnosed with cerebral edema in hospital, where doctors were able to reduce the swelling. Prior to working on Enter the Dragon, he had already shot over 100 minutes of footage for the film Game of Death, which he continued working on just a couple of months after this incident. Bruce Lee met with producers before complaining of a headache. He was given painkiller Equidesic, which contains both aspirin and tranquilizer meprobamate. After 10 minutes of trying to wake him up, a doctor sent for an ambulance, but Lee was pronounced dead on arrival at age 32. The autopsy found his brain had swollen to 13% and that he'd suffered an allergic reaction to the tranquilizer. The film was never fully completed and was released using older footage of Lee from various sources. It also featured his trademark yellow and black tracksuit. Controversially, his actual corpse in an open casket is shown in the film as his character fakes his own death. The Crow produced a 22-episode TV series remake in 1998 with Mark Dacascos taking on the role of Eric Draven. Despite positive reviews and ratings, Universal cancelled the show after purchasing Polygram, leaving the final episode on a massive cliffhanger with Eric stripped of his invulnerability. Much like the original, tragedy also struck the series, as a special effects explosion caused the death of stuntman Mark Ackerstream when he was struck by debris. 3 sequels were made to The Crow, all of which featured new characters following the same basic plot of a murder victim taking revenge on his killers, and none of which reached the same success as the original. Vincent Perez starred as Ash Corvin in 1996's The Crow City of Angels, co-starring Thomas Jane and Iggy Pop, with Mia Kirshner taking over as Sarah, making her the only character to appear in more than one movie. Coincidentally, Kirshner also co-starred with Michael Massey in 24. The sequel also starred Tai Trang, famous for playing the original Yellow Power Ranger Trini. Trang unfortunately suffered fatal injuries in a horrific car accident in 2001. Eric Mabius played Alex Corvus in the 2000 sequel The Crow Salvation. This was based more on the 1998 novel The Crow Lazarus Heart, changing the basic plot format of the series as Alex is framed for the murder of his girlfriend and wrongfully executed. It also stars Kirsten Dunst as his late girlfriend's sister. Due to negative reactions to the previous sequel, Salvation was released direct-to-video after a very limited run, but received slightly higher ratings. The fourth, and so far final, film in the series, 2005's The Crow Wicked Prayer, stars Edward Furlong as Jimmy Cuervo, who was killed along with his fiancée in a satanic ritual by a biker gang led by David Boreanaz's Loot Crash. This was the poorest reviewed of all and currently holds a 0% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. It also starred Tara Reid, Tito Ortiz, Danny Trejo, and the late Dennis Hopper. Another sequel was actually planned in the 90s, directed by Rob Zombie. The Crow 2037 was to take place in the distant future, but was, let's say thankfully, never made. There have been many more attempts to remake the original with stars such as Bradley Cooper, Mark Wahlberg and Tom Hiddleston. Most recently, and most promising of all, it seemed as though Jason Momoa was set to remake the film, but after 2 years it was confirmed that Momoa had left the project despite his clear enthusiasm. It seems the idea of remaking this original story continues to be doomed. James O'Barr has stated in an interview, "It doesn't matter who you get to star in it, or if you get Ridley Scott to direct it and spend $200 million on it, you're still not going to top what Brandon Lee and Alex Proyas did in that first $10 million movie." Proyas has also voiced his objection to a remake, as it should remain as Brandon Lee's legacy. On Lee's tombstone is the inscription of a passage from Paul Bowles' book, The Sheltering Sky, which was used for his wedding invitations and was quoted by Lee while being interviewed during production of The Crow.
Because we do not know when we will die, we get to think of life as an inexhaustible well. And yet everything happens only a certain number of times, and a very small number, really. How many more times will you remember a certain afternoon of your childhood, an afternoon that is so deeply a part of your being that you can't even conceive of your life without it? Perhaps 4 or 5 times more, perhaps not even that. How many more times will you watch the full moon rise? Perhaps 20, and yet it all seems limitless.
Next time on Hollywood Curses, perhaps the most infamous alleged curse in Hollywood history, as 2 young cast members lost their lives during the production of the Poltergeist trilogy.